Welcome to the Podcast Growth Show. Next level thinking on how to increase your podcast subscriber base. Hey, welcome to the Podcast Growth Show. It's Jürgen here with episode 5. And today is going to be a little different. We're going to talk about the importance of building a great podcast homepage and the role that plays in promoting your podcast. So let me apologize a bit in advance. Talking about podcast homepage design patterns is a mostly visual exercise. And if you're listening to this on the podcast and not able to see the video and the show notes, I'll try my best to verbally explain the page layout elements as we go through this. What we're looking at here basically is a mock-up design of a design pattern of what this might look like. And for those of you who've heard or read on our blog or subscribed to any of our content or even subscribed to our SEO optimization courses or downloaded our podcast marketing books, you know that I'm really big and focused on building and getting leads to subscribe to your podcast via email rather than just on iTunes. I think that once you capture a lead on email, you can get them to the other places with follow-up sequences, with your other messaging, but you're building a permanent business asset by capturing someone's email to subscribe to your podcast. And what do I mean by that? Well, to subscribe, to be notified when your podcast episodes are launching. And where do you send them with those notifications? Well, you send them to your show notes page, where you may have further offers or lead magnets or other ways in which you can help them with additional content, with additional related episodes, with additional value-added insights that you might have about the topic of your show. So I'm really big on trying to optimize for email addresses, and that's what these homepages are about. So this is a design pattern whose sole purpose it is to make it easier and to take your listeners and your site visitors on a journey to discover your podcast, what it is about, to discover the topics and the story behind them, your philosophy around why you have the show that you have, and to basically download something in exchange for an email address and to sign up for your podcast notifications via email. So that being said, what we're looking at here is a design pattern called the upside down podcast homepage. And above the reason that it's called upside down, let me just cover that right away, because there is no menu, or rather there is very little or a short menu. So if you have to have a link above the fold, it's really trying to treat this like a landing page. And with a landing page, you would have no distractions, or the minimal amount of distractions from getting people to do what you want them to do, which is to sign up to your podcast via email. And so you can do that by asking a question or being really customer-centric and visitor-centric. What is it that your podcast listener gets out of listening to your show? Is there a giveaway or something that you can, entice them with in exchange for their email address? And that's what you want to have on the top of the page. So the above the fold section is dedicated to getting people to sign up via email. And there is no menu. Good practice is to have a face. Obviously the logo of your podcast may already have that, and you may display that here. But typically, if it's a solopreneur or a small business, having a face there instills confidence. And you want to have a solid call to action above the fold, something that is simple to consume. It doesn't have to be a huge, long download. We go into that in some of our other videos as to how to best design a lead magnet for your audience. But you want to have something very simple, and to basically advertise that you're giving them a gift or something that they can download or something that they will receive as part of signing up for your podcast by email. And that should be something useful, something that solves an immediate problem that they might have, something that gives them a checklist or something else that relates to the content of your show. Okay, second is the social proof band. And the social proof band is just to let them know you're not a weirdo, or to illustrate that, look, I've been in the top 10 of the podcast, or as seen on TV. You can also put mini testimonials from podcast listeners here. Maybe grab a couple of your best iTunes reviews and display them here. By the way, a design aspect of social proof display is to present these logos sort of as grayed out shapes. You see that a lot. That's a modern design. It's sort of brand neutral, and you can still have your podcast homepage look like your brand, like it's integrated with your brand and not, has with colorful other logos. So often these are just done as sort of grayed out sections. Then, depending on how complex your offering and how many topics and how many different kinds of things you cover in your podcast, you might want to have a roadmap section. And the roadmap section is sort of an on-ramp to lead visitors further into your content, into your best episodes. So if you cover, for example, marketing and design, well, you might have the best episodes that were about marketing or best episodes about design. Or if you have seasons, you have season 1 that covered one topic and season 2 covered another topic and is now past. You can use this as a roadmap and as an on-ramp to guide people to each season. And when they click on these buttons, the site should scroll down to that section. Let's say if this was on season 1, it would scroll to here. If somebody clicks on this button, it might take them to season 2. So that's the logic. It's sort of like you guide them you get them more curious about, and you talk about the value proposition and what is in it for them to explore further. So, what is in it for them to listen to season 1? What's in it for them listening to season 2? And you want to summarize that in a very clever way up here. So the customer-centric messaging really is key. And, if you work with us, you know that we use value proposition design and Ryan Levesque's the ask method to basically design these questions and to make it so that people really see a reflection of themselves and of their situation and of what they want to get out of listening to your podcast, in this part. Okay, so the next section then that we scroll down to are, sometimes called the pilot story. Brian Harris of Video Fruit, who sort of invented the concept of the upside down homepage, talks about this a lot, and he calls them pilot stories. But really the concept here is that instead of letting your best content be buried somewhere in your site, you elevate it here and you make it very visible for your audience. And the way that in a podcast situation that I would do, maybe take the most recent episode about this particular pilot story. So pilot stories don't have to be about seasons. They could also be about, if you're talking about marketing or if you're talking about design, your most recent marketing episode would go here, and your best marketing episodes would be displayed as, jump off icons down here. And maybe you would describe what people, again, will get out of listening to your marketing advice. And then you have a call to action right here. So your call to action links really are about offering them another lead magnet or getting them to subscribe to your show. But if I had a 10-point checklist for the best podcast marketing tips, now this is what I would put here. If I'm also talking about design in other episodes, I might have a design-specific lead magnet. Make sense? Okay, so where do you find what these episodes are? Well, that's simple. Just go to your podcast analytics and find the top episodes about that particular subtopic or genre. And then just from a design perspective, so I'm hoping that this makes sense and you can sort of see the power of creating an experience for your podcast homepage visitors to go through, rather than sticking a big subscribe on the iTunes link that takes them directly to iTunes or Apple or Google or wherever. You're trying to create a journey where you're getting to, both communicate with them, have them discover themselves and their issues with what you're talking about, and really connect with why they should listen to your show and what they will get out of listening to your show. So these design bands on the homepage are just sort of philosophy quotes. They're really there mostly to break up the content, to make it not so dense, and to make it look attractive, but also a chance for you to put some quotables, put some tweetables, and talk a little bit about really what the driving philosophy is behind your show. So, here I'll go quickly now. Here we go with pilot story 2 or season 2 or topic number 2 that you might cover in the podcast. Again, a design band here with some interesting statistics maybe about what, your industry or what your show is all about. And only towards the bottom, would I recommend putting the where to subscribe to this podcast band. Like this is basically where you can jump off to iTunes, where to find the show or subscribe on Stitcher or via RSS feed. And then, of course, last but not least, a grid of all of your episodes, because someone visiting your podcast homepage obviously would expect to find all of your episode links. So I'm hoping this makes sense. On the bottom, then, is the actual navigations. And this is, again, why it's an upside-down homepage. So the other links to your site, your offerings, your speaking engagements, or other things that you might be offering or talking about, you want to avoid having a complex menu at the top of your site that gives people pause, creates friction and confusion and distraction and jump-off points to drill down into other parts of your site before you've really had a chance to convince people to subscribe to your show. So this might be where the other pieces of navigations live. And of course, look, if you are a speaker, you might take one of your pilot story and one of the purposes of having a podcast is to get speaking engagements. Well, then you might have something around where you've had speaking topics or where these become the jump off points on your podcast homepage. And the call to action could be then, well, hire me as a speaker or see me in action at speaking events, because that's where we cover this topic in much greater detail and you might benefit from watching that. So, try to keep it mostly about your visitor, try to keep it around about your audience, and as little as possible about you and how great you are or what your services are. Now, let me pause and switch over to another portion of this, because there's a simple version as well. So if you have a very narrowly focused podcast with a simple niche, let me just switch over to an example of what that might look like. So, here we have a much simplified version of the same concept of where we just have, again, the above the fold, subscribe to my podcast, social proof, a single pilot story, and then where to subscribe to the podcast and your episode grids. So you can condense the concept. The concept that I showed in the first part of the video was, the more complete version of it. So please let me know what you think. Ask any questions. Join our podcast marketing group on Facebook, and let me know what you think and whether this makes sense to you. Until next time. Jürgen from Body Mash. See you later. Thank you for listening to the Podcast Growth Show. Visit us at podcastgrowthshow.com and download your podcasting resources guide.